So, in the previous part of this sequence, in this mini series on Evergreen, the company, we left off in 2023, where Eurolast and myself have parted ways with the company, and the first ideas of how Evergreen might pivot into something other than a Chia company have just come into the mix. So this is the beginning of 2024, and James, I'm going to have to lean a lot on you to help me understand really what happened because at this time you had been promoted to CTO, right? So I think you're taking on an expanded role. So the way that the company was previously was I was the CEO, Dylan was the CTO, and you were our chief engineer. And so when I left the company, Dylan took on the CEO role and he promoted you to CTO. So you guys are now uh, doing some different stuff. And I think that at this point, you're thinking about compressed plots in a different way because you were starting to get connected with Mad Max. Or yeah, help me set up 2024 here.
So I'm gonna back up 1 month to help set up 2024. It was in December-ish when I stepped up as CTO of Evergreen. It was also when a lot of the issues really started to happen with the farming. Um, Grant's company Irelast was what managed all of the full node infrastructure that Evergreen was running on. And at the end of 2023, we actually hit a limitation in the software infrastructure. And it wasn't necessarily in the code that Grant's team had written. It was in the way the full node actually interacted with the systems. We found that there is just a hard limit to the number of farmers that you can have connected to an individual full node. Not a hard limit set in software, but a hard limit in the sense that the full node completely falls apart once you hit a certain number of farmers. So we basically had to redo our whole infra since Grant was no longer with the company at that point to solve this issue that we were having. And once we did that, there was a couple weeks of intermittent problems and issues, but we got everything up and running relatively quick. This also led to one of the first big bugs we had at Evergreen, where the new implementation that we had a bug in one of its WebSocket implementations that caused blocks not to sign for about 3 weeks on Space Farmers Network. The Space Farmers team didn't notice immediately, and they actually have implemented a whole bunch of auditing tools since this event, because I think it was kind of a wake-up call for both teams. And we ended up solving that issue and getting the Evergreen units moving again. And since that point, we're very interactive with the Space Farmers team every time an update was pushed to validate that none of the Evergreen farmers were having issues. And this was originally one of the number one reasons we even wanted to have the pool, is the insight that you can gain on the health of the Evergreen fleet from the pool side ended up being very critical for us. So we ended up relying heavily on Space Farmers for extra health metrics to basically just know that the Evergreen fleet was working correctly. They actually created a new page on their site, spacefarmers.io/reconciliation, and it's a way to basically audit the pool and that the partials and the blocks coming in are being correctly signed and that nobody's, being dead weight. That kind of hit Evergreen a little bit, and then it was about this same time that Chia started talking about the new plot format. And the new plot format was a very scary thing for Evergreen. We saw the drop off of sales almost instantly. Everybody was kind of left in the dark. Nobody knew the actual time frames. The words that were coming out from the Chia team and Bram was originally an estimate of months. And, we're here a year later and we still don't actually have the plot format public. But that initial scare and that initial uncertainty of, well, if I buy an Evergreen unit today, does that mean it's dead in 3 months? Or does that mean it's dead in a year? Caused a lot of our customer base to just drop off and stop buying the units. And one of the things I think we failed at Evergreen was reassuring the customers that we would be there for them, that if they bought the units, they would be replotted, and trying to encourage people to still buy those Chia units just wasn't what happened. And so, what Grant has up on the screen here, the Evergreen 2 Enterprise, this is when we started to focus on the AI. So, there wasn't a belief that Chia was going to be a valid path for us to go purely because of the uncertainty around the plot format. And so the marketing for Chia stuff kind of got winded down. The actual production of new units winded down, and it was just about getting existing orders caught up and out the door and flowing. We were selling, the C29 kits at about the same time here. And up until the announcement of the new format, those were incredibly popular and were selling very fast. They were very great units and actually had great earnings with them.
Yeah, this I think we shouldn't gloss over is the sort of partnership that happened between Gigahorse and Evergreen to produce these really, really compressed plots and this super high throughput with remote decompression. When did that kind of come out? Was that the first quarter
So,
of 2024?
so Fast Farmer was already done at this point. I had written Fast Farmer on my own time. The current open source implementation of Fast Farmer is in the Galactex repo and is owned by Galactex LLC. At the time, Dylan, through Evergreen, helped get me connected with Mad Max and his team, and we agreed to develop a Gigahorse version of the Farmer. Now, obviously, this was going to have Gigahorse source code in it, and so we were not able to have this be a public repo. And it was at that time that Dylan had decided he wanted to own Fast Farmer. He wanted it to be an Evergreen product, not something that my company had done in the free time. So we were in negotiations to sell the farmer to him. We had talked about a couple of potential payment paths. One of them was a flat payment for, I assume I can say it, but for $12,000. And the other potential route that we had talked about was me getting the farmer rewards from the farmer based on the fee that Evergreen takes for our version of the Gigahorse Farmer, and I would be paid out from those proceeds. We never came to a formal agreement, but because I was CTO of Evergreen at the time, and because for the last 2.5, 3 years I've just lived and worked with Dylan, I trusted it wouldn't be a problem. So the Gigahorse version was created in the Evergreen repo. That Gigahorse version is a very unique farmer. I don't think Max has produced, those C libraries with anyone else except for Flex Farmer, which is now shut down. So I think it is currently the only Gigahorse compatible farmer that isn't using, again, any of CNI's code. The default Gigahorse farmer is using the default CNI farmer. Fast Farmer doesn't. And we've quickly found that one of the largest benefits of Fast Farmer wasn't even anything to do with the farming. It had to do with how it interacts with the OS and how it performs when talking to the hard drives. So JM has a sizable farm. I'm not going to go into details, but during startup of his farm with the default Chia farmer, he was telling me it would take anywhere between 20 or 30 minutes before the farm was actually up and farming. With Fast Farmer, it was under 2 minutes that he was able to get fully up and farming. So for a large farmer like that, if you ever have to restart the software, that extra 30 minutes is a lot of time that you could be earning money, especially with a sizable farm. So Fast Farmer very quickly became popular with a lot of the larger farmers. So it is used exclusively right now in the Evergreen fleet, or at least it was at my time of leaving. and the a lot of the largest farms out there in Chia are very likely using Fast Farmer. And if they are not, they probably just haven't heard about why they should be.
So you guys
Um,
have made a C29 kit. You're working with Mad Max. You're working with Gigahorse C29. Dylan's got designs on AI, and you guys are starting to dabble with this product. And you were very involved with everything that Evergreen was doing with AI, right? I mean, you're the CTO, so you're working on code for this stuff. And I imagine you had early insights into what Paul and Dylan would eventually found as Berkeley Compute.
yes. So I had early conversations with Dylan and JM. I never spoke with Paul directly. Um,
Right, JM
well,
was
I
sort
never.
of our window into Chia for the longest time, but I think the thing
Yeah,
that we didn't talk a lot about was that there was this big reduction in force at Chia. So Chia sort of, had a lot of people who had been working there, and they tried to raise some more money, didn't effectively do that, and so they had to lay a lot of people off. One of the people they lost, which was I think shocking to all of us, was that John Michael Hands left the company. He was no longer working at Chia, and so he was our primary contact. He's who helped get the cultivation grant across the line. Dylan had a great relationship with JM, and so yeah, no surprise that JM is the one that we're mostly uh, that you guys are mostly talking to because his relationship to Evergreen was very close.
exactly. And I had actually spoken with JM directly through DMs and other things in the past, whereas with Paul I hadn't. So JM was definitely our resource, and talking with him and Dylan about what their kind of vision was for Berkeley Compute um, was definitely something I was on board with, and I thought was a great idea for us to get into, especially after we started building the first couple of test units and we were renting them out. It was very clear that this is the next bubble. This is the next boom. This is the next thing people are interested in. And we were positioned very well to help get it into the hands of everybody.
So what are we looking
So,
at here? This was a device you guys produced. Did you sell many of these? So this is a bunch of 4090s in a box?
so we never produced the box. There was some prototypes that Dylan had printed, but everything that we actually produced looked more like your traditional Ethereum miner. So you can kind of see inside the box there. There's the typical aluminum frame of an Ethereum miner. That's what the units actually look like right now. They don't have a box around them. And in all honesty, I don't think a box would work. The heat that
It
these
just
drives,
it's just gonna trap all the heat.
yeah, you can't. It just won't do it. The heat is unmanageable if you trap it like this.
Yeah, because I mean, the idea of making a box makes a lot of sense when you have a hard drive and a Raspberry Pi and it's not producing any heat. But these GPUs, they're throwing off heat like there's no tomorrow. I mean, this is like the traditional thing that people had problems with. When they're mining on Ethereum, is you need to have like significant airflow or water cooling. So probably the only way something like this would work is if that thing was water cooled.
Exactly, and this is something This was a lot of the start of some of the arguments between Dylan and myself. We had had some arguments of practicality at Evergreen, but the box here was definitely one of those things where from the beginning I knew this is not a practical way of doing this. But either way, we did sell the units. We did get these aluminum frames up and running. We did get them in the hands of customers. We never shipped, as far as I'm aware, we've never shipped one of them out to somebody. All of these units are actually hosted in a facility that's out in Wyoming. So you are buying the units in the sense that you own this hardware. And if you asked Evergreen to ship it to you, they would ship it to you. But by default, buying one of these units meant that you were committing to hosting it in their data center.
Well, because that is part of the thing about making a home unit is it's only really compelling if you have the ability to run it profitably. And so most people, to run something like this out of their home, they're going to need to have cheap power because this thing is going to suck down power. I mean, this is not a low energy unit in any way.
No, and if you don't even have 220, the odds of you being able to run this are almost zero too. You'll pop a breaker on a standard home outlet.
So just to back up a little bit to catch me up here, at this point, it's the concerns with the plot format at CNI. So is Evergreen at this point totally abandoned, or is pivoting? I guess like that you guys talked about the notion of the pivot, and so have you embraced this pivot and said we're going to AI GPU, we're abandoning low power, and this is the new bubble, this is the thing.
I won't say that we had committed anything to abandoning previous Evergreen. That was never the intention. That was never the goal. I was still producing active software updates for the Evergreen fleet and for the farmer and for the node infrastructure. Um,
And
we definitely,
there was a new developer that was in the mix that was working on the wallet. So, in no way did the Chia ecosystem ever get abandoned. I don't think.
But
at this point, the Chio ecosystem had not been abandoned.
but were you still, you said you had dwindled down the drives that you were producing and shipping out, and
So
the
there, we had a
orders.
marketing budget that we were doing to, advertise the Evergreen units and to get them out there into people's hands and to work with, YouTube partners to get videos of the units and stuff done. All of that winded down. And the reality is, a lot of our sales came from those marketing efforts. And so when we winded down the marketing efforts, the sales themselves also winded down even further than what was happening with the plot format thing from Chia.
And then eventually, you just pulled the stock. Like you didn't even make them available for sale at all, right?
Yes, I think that was in about April or May where Dylan made the decision to just turn off the ability to purchase.
And were you having discussions with CNI about the issue uh, with what they were talking about with regards to the plot format, how that was affecting your sales? Was there an ongoing dialogue there, or was it just let's focus on GPUs and AI?
There are some public Twitter threads and some public comments in Shia's general Discord where we were very open with them about how their words were affecting our company. They were not very receptive to helping us in any capacity and did not seem to have much care how the announcement that they made affected our business.
I remember that time. So I so the focus now is turning on GPUs and what that business model is going to look like.
Yes, at this point, February, March, April-ish, the full focus was GPUs. So, I was making updates to the Chia stuff, but at this point, I had started development on a software stack that was going to be, or that was intended to be sold to Berkeley Compute. This was
Oh, so
always the plan from day one.
so Berkeley Compute has already been announced at this point. When does Berkeley
No,
Compute
no,
end?
this was still private. Dylan at this point had talked with JM extensively about Berkeley Compute, and in their discussions, one of the things that Dylan promised to bring to the table was software that would help people manage GPUs. I can't go into too much details about how that works and what we decided to use as far as technology platforms, but if you want to think of it as a service very similar to RunPod or Vast AI, where you can add a GPU to the service, then the service will rent that GPU out, and then you get paid a portion of that rental fee as the person who owns the GPU. That was the general design of this service.
Hmm. Okay, and did JM has
So
has
so so James is in the room when they're coming up with these plans. Like he's there. Like this is at the genesis of these things. JM is talking to Dylan, and they're conceptualizing how they're going to do this. Like James is sitting there at the table.
And yep, sitting there, designing it, talking it through with them. At the time, it was understood that I would be the lead software engineer at Berkeley Compute. This was told to me and promised to me by Dylan, and there's definitely text that backs that up. So I was not working for Berkeley Compute. It was not officially announced yet, and it was not officially a company. But there was an expectation that I would have a job there, and there was an expectation that the software that I would be developing at Evergreen would be sold to them.
And JM has left CNI at this point. Evergreen is hemorrhaging in the wake of announcements and things going on at CNI with Chia. How much
Yeah,
was
and I think that that's an interesting thing to kind of just put a little bit of thought into, because if you think about what our business model was throughout all of 2023, it was selling hardware, because we're not actively receiving new investment usually. Like, we were raising some money throughout all of 2023, but it's not how we funded operations. Mostly we funded operations at Evergreen out of sales of the Chia infrastructure devices that we were selling. So if those dry up and go to zero, then the company will start running out of cash, because if it has fixed expenses and there's no more revenues coming in, then you just start burning down your war chest of whatever you developed throughout all of 2023.
And so this is actually a topic I'm going to touch on a little bit here. So when I stepped into my position as CTO, I took a 33% pay cut. And that was entirely because Evergreen was not financially capable of continuing to do this. And so I took a pay cut from, I was probably averaging close to, I'd say 16 to 18K a month. I went down to 10K a month. And that was agreed to be my payment rate moving forward as a way of helping Evergreen out. And it was also understood that, again, this taking the pay cut would be solved in the future when we had the positions at Berkeley and when we sold the software to Berkeley.
and again going to we've talked too about the relationship between CNI. Like, Evergreen is a company that's building on Chia blockchain, but not closely tied into with CNI. You guys are building and using the same tools. And as I look and see the effects of Chia's announcements and the way they put out this new plot format and their relationship with you going forward, also JM leaving the company, was this GPU clustering or this you know immolation of vast AI or whatever we want to call what Berkeley Compute would come. How was it to be related to Chia? Because I don't necessarily see the tie or the relationship there. Was
At
this
the time, the thought was the token to use the GPUs would be on Chia. There wasn't necessarily a tie to a given blockchain at the beginning. The design was to just have a GPU rental platform that was built on top of a blockchain. And actually, one of the earlier chains that Dylan wanted to explore was Solana. And so, we had looked at both Solana and Chia as potential chains that we would be building this thing on top of.
And are you able to like, when does CNI become interested in Berkeley Compute, and certainly to the tune of the investment that they made into Berkeley Compute?
Again, it was under the impression that the token we would use would be Chia. I don't think the contract between Chia and Berkeley Compute actually specifies that it has to be Chia, but I think it is understood between both parties that the token that is going to be used on this platform is going to be some sort of a cat on the Chia blockchain.
And there's an NFT, I think, which somehow
Yeah.
represents the fractional earnings of a GPU. So I think the NFT is also supposed to be some sort of a conveyance of the proceeds related to the GPU itself.
And CNI is concerned about net stasis and consensus security. They talked to you guys about, or to Evergreen, about one-click farming. Is this them having concerns about their ability to have a new plot format, and thinking about how they're going to expand their net space, and creating some, was that part of the calculation in the relationship with Berkeley Compute?
It is my understanding that this has absolutely nothing to do with farming. This is a revenue stream for Chia, and it is a way for Chia to capitalize on the AI bubble. I do not, during all of my discussions as a part of this, farming, the plot format, or anything to do with it is not related. This has nothing to do with farming. This is purely a revenue stream for Chia to make some money.
And this is a pivot for the company. So this is Evergreen pivoting, and then maybe even like exiting, right? So this is, some portions of Evergreen being sold off to Berkeley.
Grant, can you scroll down a little bit on this page? Because I'm
Yeah.
a little curious. If Evergreen Systems Co. is one of the founding members of Berkeley Compute, that means Evergreen is the one who has ownerships?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I read through this and this confused me because I saw this and I was not sure how this was going to work, especially if Dylan was going to continue to be the CEO at the company. I know how hard it is to
What
be
was
in
the
two companies.
What was that first bullet point above
Yeah.
Evergreen will leverage? There you go. Well, there's the pivot point right there. Evergreen Systems Co. is transitioning its focus to high-performance cloud computing. The company will contribute over 800 GPU cards. So that statement too. I mean, I don't know how much we want to talk about that, but Evergreen does not own 800 GPU cards. In fact, I don't think Evergreen even owns 10 4090 GPU cards.
Well, it might be in that asset sheet. We could probably go look.
I don't remember seeing any 4090s in there, personally,
Okay.
when I looked through it. That's why I was trying to be careful. I don't remember seeing any. I was under the impression that Evergreen owned some, and it's interesting to me that they're not listed in the asset sheet, because I am aware of at least 10 that Evergreen owns, as those were the ones that were running the Evergreen Compute for all of the farmers.
The decompressors.
The decompressors. So I don't know what happened with those, but those 800 GPUs do not belong to Evergreen.
Well, James, maybe let's, and sorry to pepper you with all of my questions about the relationship between CNI, Evergreen, and Berkeley Compute, but I'm very much in the dark with this in this regard. But let's turn back to maybe a more chronological.
Well, no, I mean this is critical because if we're going to talk about Evergreen, right, and what happened in 2024 is largely this kind of stuff was going on. I mean, this is where James is asked to take a haircut. He's the CTO. They're pivoting to AI. I mean, Berkeley coming in. This is all germane. So I would say don't apologize because I think it's relevant to the story because when we get to the end of this, Evergreen is selling itself off and Dylan is now the CTO at Berkeley Compute. So if we're gonna close off the chapter here, this is important to how that's all going to shake out, especially with the new blue logo here.
Yeah, well, I'm very interested in what all was happening then. So, James, please continue with what was going on in early 2024 and what was happening at that point.
So we'll go back to where I think I left off, which is about February, March. So we transitioned to working on this GPU software. I had been promised a position at Berkeley Compute. I took a pay cut, and in February, Dylan was late on his first payment to my company. So there are 3 independent contractors that Evergreen had hired, myself and my other 2 managing members of Galactex. All 3 of us were hired on by Evergreen to do various parts of the system. I was doing software. One of the other managing members was in charge of the garage facility, so he handled the shipment of the orders and making sure that everything in the garage was running correctly. And then I say the garage, the where we did all of the assembly, the shipping, the packing, the order management. That was
And
him.
this is
Yeah,
still
because at this point the garage had been upgraded to like a full-on production facility. It was in a garage, but I mean
There were
pretty
5
sophisticated.
workstations in the garage where we had, at some days, 4 or 5 employees in my garage working. So very much was a production facility. And then the other managing member did all of the server room infrastructure and the managing of the hard drives and the plotting and the keeping track of the orders before it goes out to the production facility in the garage. So all 3 of us had our first late payment in February. And talking to Dylan, again, we had been working with him for 2+ years at this point. He was very apologetic. He was very sorry. He was embarrassed. And he said he was going to fix it as soon as he could. And so he paid us February in March, meaning he was behind again in March. But at this point, the GPU business started picking up. So we started to get income coming in from the GPU rigs that were being rented, the first couple of them that we had actually built. And then he hired on another employee. And this other employee, he hired on at the exact same salary rate as my reduced rate that I had just taken, and gave this employee the task of designing the front-end framework for the GPU software that we were working on. This was one of the first real bits of contention between Dylan and myself, because as the CTO of the company, he hired on somebody to work on our tech stack that I didn't get to interview or didn't get to talk to, or I basically had a 5-minute conversation with him prior to Dylan saying, this guy's hired and he's going to work for you, which was very frustrating and felt very disrespectful and very much made me question what he viewed my actual role at the company as. In addition to that, it got frustrating because he was paying this employee's paycheck on time every single month, while my team was still behind 1 month at this point. And he actually was getting more and more behind as time went on. So throughout the year, we continued to develop this front end. I continued to develop the back end software, and Dylan fell further and further behind on the payments to my company. All 3 of us. We hit a breaking point in September. Not even, if I'm looking at the date on this Berkeley Compute article, it had to have been a week or 2 before they announced Berkeley Compute. I finally went to Dylan and said, look, you're almost at 3 months that you're behind. And financially, this is really hard for myself and my team. We need you to pay us. Like, I have access to the account. I can see how much money is in there. I know you're able to pay us. I don't understand why you haven't paid us. Please pay my team. His response was to fire my entire team and cancel all of the Galactic's contracts, including the use of the facility and the rental of the servers. So we shut everything down that day. He sent us the email saying cancel all contracts. One of the clauses in our contracts is we are required to upload, so sync all of our code that we have, and then remove all documentation from the company out of all of our systems. And we complied with our contract, even though at this point Dylan had been in breach of contract for about 8 months. So Dylan gets really upset with us for not allowing his employees to continue to work at my home, and he proceeds to contact legal to start to come after us. I get notification from Evergreen's lawyers where they demand that I stop attacking their systems and give Dylan access back to his infrastructure, which really confused me because my team hadn't touched his infrastructure and had not done anything. And we had actually removed all of our ability to access his infrastructure the day he canceled all of our contracts. So we end up going back and forth where they're accusing us of attacking their systems and taking down their network and being malicious actors. And we reply back with, we have no idea what you're talking about. Please get into a meeting with us and have a conversation. We don't know what you are talking about. And so we get into a meeting with the lawyers without any lawyers on our side at this point. We were still just ourselves. And I'm in the meeting, and they are telling me that we have locked Dylan out of all of his servers. And we asked them for proof, evidence. And they say, well, Dylan can't get in. And I said, okay, well, does Dylan remember what the root password is? And Dylan says, no. And I say, okay, well, unfortunately, if Dylan forgot the root password, that is not the fault or blame of my company. We have returned all documentation to Dylan that we have on these servers. We don't have physical access to the servers anymore or remote access to the servers anymore. And we are not responsible if Dylan failed to keep track of a password. They did not like that answer. And so we came back to them and said, that's fine. You know what? We can find a compromise. Dylan currently owes us money. If Dylan pays us the money and gets caught up on his contract, so he's no longer in breach of it, then we will happily abide by the terms of the contract, which says that we will participate in transition and training of new team, and that will involve us helping Dylan get access back into his servers. They declined. So at that point, it was my opinion and my team's opinion, and later my lawyer's opinion, that we have no obligation to help Dylan at this point. So the Evergreen systems were down for a few days. I don't know how long it was, but all farming was not working. And I still to this day do not know what actually happened. I do not know how he, quote unquote, hacked into the servers to recover them, as he likes to brag. But he forgot the root password. And I'm not going to say what the root password is, but my team may remember it, and it's in the realm of QWERTY, Press a couple things that are lined up in a row. Not a hard password to forget, not something that a password manager was used for like it should have been. Just poor management. So that's led to a lot of kind of, I guess, where we are today with Evergreen. I don't know if you want me to kind of back up and talk about any specific point there, Lucas or Grant, but.
Well, I think maybe to summarize some of this stuff, just so that we're getting to the point where we're at. So your team has exited. Now Dylan has removed all the stuff from the facility, and he is solidly out in Wyoming, but nothing is for sale as far as new Chia equipment. So he's pretty much completely exited that business, except for keeping it online. And some of that's been challenging as well. I think with the 251 upgrade, there were some amount of time where partials were being rejected because the node infrastructure hadn't been updated. So I think you've just been kind of watching that from the sidelines, like the rest of us. You've been seeing the community sort of, being increasingly upset that these devices that were purchased aren't working the way that they had expected. And yeah,
I mean, I've been personally getting more and more upset. It's heartbreaking to see something that you spend years of your life building and putting your name on and creating this product that you're proud of. And like, again, I gave these to my family, like I was proud to have these. I was excited to have this business. I was proud of Evergreen. And
I agree. I want to echo that. I was proud of Evergreen. I was proud of what we accomplished. I think we birthed something extremely cool, and I didn't want to see it go away in any way.
I still to this day don't want to see it go away. Evergreen holds a special place in my heart, and I would love to see it continue to run correctly long into the future.
Yeah, and so if we talk about kind of where we're at today, recent developments are that it appears that Evergreen has contacted a special purpose facility legal team that dissolves companies and sort of retires companies when they are no longer desired to be in operation, and that the assets of Evergreen have been put up for sale. And certain members of the Chia community have now stepped up and said that it seems like they are planning on bidding on these assets to try and scoop these up to, I don't know, become the manager of said assets. And it looks like the GPU business has been carved up in such a way that it might be able to be sold off to somebody who wants it.
It does look that way, and the unfortunate part is, and something that I've been dealing with my public statements recently, is one of the assets that they've decided to put into this asset sale is not owned by them. If you remember back to the earlier part of this conversation, the Gigahorse Fast Farmer was developed on my time, and it was pushed into Evergreen as part of an agreement that they were going to purchase that software. Evergreen never purchased that software, but now they are locking it up in this asset sale, which is where my post that I've been making in a lot of these different communities over the last couple of days has basically been a public call to try to get that software back. I've spoken with Max directly. He is 100% on board that, that's my software. He's committed to creating a new version of the C code for me that points to a new address, so I can update that software to completely remove Evergreen from it, who is currently still profiting from the software they have not paid me for. Right now, all of the fees that are gathered through Fast Farmer are going directly to Evergreen.
Well, there is the sticky dissolution of those assets, which we will see how that occurs. But I'm also concerned about Evergreen's commitment to maintaining, to supporting the miners that exist in the world today. Do you?
It seems like right now Michael Taylor is trying to make that commitment. In a lot of these conversations that were had on Discord where we were talking about the asset sale, Michael Taylor has made it very clear that he intends to buy and maintain the Evergreen fleet if another party does not do so. Which honestly, I have a lot of concerns with the fact that the fleet's even being sold off to the highest bidder and not, some audited or reviewed party. The Evergreen devices, as they currently stand, you can deploy our remote support tools that contains an SSH client, which will allow anybody who purchases the Evergreen network to immediately have a botnet of thousands of devices that they control and can remotely access and exist in people's homes.
And and is the other thing that I think it's sticky here is one, Dylan's relationship with both Evergreen and Berkeley Compute, and also what the Berkeley Compute or Silicon.net, as it's changed its names, as is Berkeley Compute making a play for purchasing these assets also to continue that product stream, or
I don't think anything has been publicly said.
Yeah, that there's been no public announcements about any bidders on these assets. I think the only one who sort of stepped up and said so in a public way and didn't. I don't know if he came right out and said it, but it was kind of hinting towards it. But yeah, Michael Taylor, who's been running the dig.net and the decentralized internet projects, and I think who is also has a position at Berkeley Compute, he said that he wants to try to scoop up the Chia side of things. So I don't think Berkeley has or Silicon has publicly stated that they intend to bid on the assets that that Evergreen has put up for sale on the GPU and the AI side of things. I haven't heard anything from them.
The majority of those GPUs are Michael Taylor's. So I would imagine he has a very vested interest in at least parts of the GPU side of it.
And James, when you look at what you would like to see happen in the wake of what has already occurred with Evergreen, um, when you look at what's going on, what would you like to see happen in the future?
The ideal world for me is getting my farmer back so I can actually develop it actively again. I've been working on an open source operating system that I'm hoping to beta test in the next month or so. That is designed for the users of Evergreen to reflash onto their device if they want to have a way for Evergreen to still run, but not have remote SSH capabilities or be tied to a specific full node or be tied to a specific farm. I really want to go back to what my original goal with this ecosystem was, which was a fully open source, fully community driven slash partnered project. I want people to develop plugins. I want this to be an actual OS that people will use and that's simple and easy and continues to help people access these farmers. Ideally, I would like a world where somebody is still selling these devices. I don't know who's going to end up with the assets that are required for the construction of these devices, such as the mold for the plastics and all of the PCB designs for the hard drive connectors and etc. There's a lot of value there if it goes to the right person. I don't know who would purchase those things and not try and keep it running, but I'm not super hopeful there. My goal is to just make sure that the current farmers can maintain their farms and can keep farming and continue to use the devices that we've sold to them for years.
And Grant, you've been you've stepped away from Evergreen for some time. As you look at the state of it today, what are your takeaways?
Well, ever since I heard that Berkeley Compute was a thing and that it was transitioning to Silicon and Dylan had taken a position there, I was nervous that Evergreen was going to cease to exist. That was my first thought. Is I don't really understand how he could do both, because I know what it took to keep Evergreen as an entity that really existed. And if you have this new entity that's just fully funded, which we laid out our struggles with trying to produce funding. I mean, a $4 million war chest is a $4 million war chest, and it is substantively different lifestyle and life than what we lived under Evergreen. Like, we were scrambling for every penny, and we were scrapping to make it work. Over on the Silicon side of things, they're flush with cash. So I'd imagine, that as soon as I heard of this, that that's Dylan's desire to go be in a company that's funded and that can just, crank and do things because it's got a war chest. Ideally, what I'd like to see is this thing that I helped birth, this thing that I helped create, not cease to exist. I think that there is a universe where this makes a lot of sense. And if any of the stuff that CNI is talking about comes into play, where there's an appreciation in the price of Chia because blocks are full and because of all this stuff with Permuto, the desire for farming Chia is going to roar back. And so whoever is in a position to capitalize on that and has a company set up ready to do it could have a very viable business. So, I'm dismayed to see that this thing that I put so much time and effort into ceases to exist, because as I worked on Evergreen, I did so for an ownership component of it. And I'm about to see all of what I did for, the better part of 2 years get destroyed, its value get destroyed. So I'm sad. I'm really sad to see it happen this way. I wish that that this didn't have to be the way that it is. And I really wish that Evergreen continued to exist as a business selling Chia rigs, because it sure seems like Chia's on the cusp of being one of the next top chains. And if that's the case, then whoever can produce turnkey Chia mining rigs is going to have a substantive amount of business coming their way if they're have a shop open and they're ready to produce. and everything that we did in 2023 set us up for success. You know, there's a lot of tooling and a lot of infrastructure that had to be put in place, and it's getting sold off. So we'll have to see who picks it up and whether they can effectively, you know, pilot it through the next phase without the people who really were there to help make it work. That there would be none of those people. Usually, when you acquire a business like this, there's some continuity of team, and it doesn't seem like there would be any continuity of team, which means that whoever would buy this stuff would have to know how to pilot all of this stuff, from the vendors to the, you know, the molds to the production to the actual putting things together to the QA to the plotting. I mean, there's a lot we talked about went into this business, and there would be no continuity of team, period. That's a hard row to hoe for somebody who's going to pick up these assets if it isn't, you know,
And
James or Euroless or whatever.
the Rust code is in no way small or insignificant. I mean, to have someone come in and take over Evergreen OS is a mountain.
Well, it breaks my heart to hear to go over this story of the fall of Evergreen, and to think about what is going to happen in the future. But we are at the end of another episode. Anything that you guys want to sum up in the story of the rise and the fall of Evergreen?
I think we covered it. I don't know, James. Do you have anything else that you wanted to talk about?
I would just like to say to the Evergreen farmers out there, it's not over. The devices will still work, and there is still hope.
There's a part 4. Someday we'll get to tell the rise and fall of Evergreen and the re-rise, how the infrastructure didn't die but came roaring back to life. I'm looking forward to flashing my Evergreen so that continue to work. That sounds like a fun day.
Well, I look forward to the part 4. We have more to occur before we can get there, but we'll see what happens. James, thank you for coming on to FOMO. Thank you very much. And
You know, actually, I do have one parting thought.
Okay.
Actually, now that I think about it, not anything about Evergreen, but about James and Luna and Galactex. I want to praise this team. I want to praise this individual for the amount of stuff that he's done in the Chia community. I think if you don't know Druid Garden, if you don't know Galactex, if you don't know James, aka Luna, reach out. You know, if you're interested in learning more, he's available on Twitter. You know, he should be more prominent within our community. So I hope that we hear a lot more from James, and I hope that we see that full node come out one of these days, because as we talked about, Lucas, client diversity is super critical. So the day that we get to client diversity, I think will be a watershed moment in Chia. And I personally think that, you know, Galactex and James is one of the only people that is capable of pulling that off in any reasonable amount of time. The amount of work that it takes to create a completely independent code base that's capable of producing proper blocks on the Chia blockchain and producing the consensus mechanism, it's a very formidable task, and he is banging on the door of that. So if you're in any way interested in seeing that full node exist, and you've got some extra bucks and you want to fund it, I think he already said his door is kind of open. He'd love to get that out the door.
Thank you so much, Grant, for all the kind words. I really appreciate it. And yes, if anybody wants to reach out to me, Twitter, Reddit, I'm on GitHub, anywhere you can contact me. I will happily talk with you about all things Chia, CLVM, Rust, or just nerdy stuff in general. Thank you guys so much for having me on FOMO.
Appreciate it. All right. Well, that's the end of our first mini series, except for maybe the part 4. So hopefully one day we'll get to do that. But so far, this is it, the 3-part series of the rise and fall of Evergreen. And thanks, James, for being a part of the show. And we will see you next time on FOMO.
Thank you.